Hi there guys, I hope you are having a good day. Now let's talk about Tyson Fury and this Deontay Wilder situation. Apparently Shelley Finkel has explained that Deontay Wilder is still undergoing mediation for this, and so is Tyson Fury. So the fight between those two could still happen before Tyson Fury has any chance of facing Anthony Joshua. Now, based on what we know, what will happen, what will be the outcome of this mediation? Well, we have taken things mainly from the perspective of Tyson Fury. Also, there are facts in there that have come from reliable sources, but a lot of it as well has come from Tyson Fury, Bob Arum, and his team. So you do have to be careful when digesting that kind of content, I guess, because you have to wonder, what about Deontay Wilder's kind of perspective on this situation? We don't know necessarily, because he hasn't really spoken about that. He's spoken about Tyson Fury apparently cheating and Tyson Fury doing this and that in the fight, in the first fight as well. So he's not really spoken about why the fight didn't happen in July, why the fight didn't happen in October, and why it didn't in December, although he did come out with an injury, so I guess that does kind of put to bed that July situation, but also the pandemic had a big part to play in this fight not happening. Now, usually in a contract with a rematch clause, there is a period of time where the fighter who has lost has a certain amount of time to activate their side of the deal. Deontay Wilder did do that, so he had that opportunity and he did activate his side of the rematch clause. Now, of course, the unique situation in this case is the rematch clause didn't just apply to Deontay Wilder, the rematch clause was there for Tyson Fury also. So say Tyson Fury lost, he was then able to ask for a rematch and demand he gets it. So ultimately there was a rematch clause for both parties, and the agreement was 50-50 in the first fight, 60-40 favouring the winner in the second fight. So that is how this fight was agreed, more along the lines of like a unification fight like you would expect Tyson Fury versus Anthony Joshua to be, because they have also agreed financial terms, 50-50 in the first fight, 60-40 favouring the winner in the second fight. So the same kind of mould as for Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder. So it was approached as a unification fight. And what that does mean, as opposed to Deontay Wilder losing, then deciding, do I want the rematch, do I not? Or say Tyson Fury losing and then Deontay Wilder being the champion, going on and going forwards and maybe fighting Anthony Joshua or someone else who he wants to fight. The unique situation in this case is there was always planned to be a rematch, provided the one who had lost wanted the fight. So Tyson Fury loses, he gets a rematch. Deontay Wilder loses, he gets a rematch. That was the case for this fight. Now, at the moment, of course, we can only go on the information we currently have, and a lot of that has come from Team Fury. So again, we do have to be careful because it is from one perspective. No matter what side we come down on, this is something different because obviously it is a mediation, and this determines whether the fight will happen next or not, or whether Tyson Fury is free to go and face, say, Anthony Joshua if he wants to. So looking at it from a narrative where you're not biased towards Tyson Fury or Deontay Wilder, because it doesn't really matter about that at the moment. This is something completely different entirely. This is down to, does the fight happen next or does it not? Because the mediation is still ongoing, and I would think that if there was no case for Deontay Wilder, it would have been thrown out already. So there is a case that he can build. So that is something we do have to keep our eyes on. Now, as we said earlier, there was a certain period of time where Deontay Wilder had the opportunity to activate his side of the rematch clause. He did do that. Then the fight was going to be scheduled for July. Injuries happened and obviously the pandemic, but then boxing was coming back in July, so there was the possibility the fight could happen. It was down to an injury that it didn't on Deontay Wilder's side. That was well documented and even admitted by Deontay Wilder. So the fight didn't happen in July based on an injury from Deontay Wilder. Then he had 3 months to make the fight. That was the agreement. If there is an injury, you have 3 months from that date to make the next fight. 3 months from the date it was supposed to be. So July, 3 months later, would take them to the end of October. So the fight must happen in October if he wants to make it happen. And again, many dates were put forward and the fight was attempted to be made, mainly from Tyson Fury's team. But again, we are taking this from Tyson Fury's perspective because that is the most information that we have gotten. So the fight was supposed to happen in October and there were many dates being thrown around. October 3rd, I believe, was the most concrete one. But again, the fight didn't happen. It was moved back again, this time due to a force majeure, and that was because of the COVID-19 pandemic, which means that the fight was then moved to December. Now, the big question is, who didn't want the fight to happen in October? We believe it was Deontay Wilder, but we don't know that. So it would come down to that, I would imagine. Did Tyson Fury not want the fight to happen in October due to crowds not being there? Or was it Deontay Wilder? If it was in fact Deontay Wilder, then he had to make a date in December if he wanted the rematch. That did not happen, and therefore he no longer gets his chance to rematch Tyson Fury. That is, of course, if it was Deontay Wilder that refused to make a date or could not agree a date in December, because Tyson Fury put forward many dates, but they didn't happen, which prompted the decision for Tyson Fury to have a homecoming in the UK on December 5th, which also never came off. But going back to that October situation and moving the fight due to the pandemic, if that was agreed from Tyson Fury, so if there was a mutual agreement that this fight cannot happen in October due to the pandemic, then that does give Deontay Wilder more of a case. If it was Deontay Wilder who didn't want the fight to happen then, and it was him who said he's not fighting in October until there are crowds there, so they can generate more revenue, then there is no case for Deontay Wilder because he's had 2 opportunities and he's turned both of them down. In fact 3, because he still could have had the fight in December but didn't. Whereas if there was an agreement between both camps to put the fight off due to the pandemic, and Tyson Fury was all too happy to say nope, let's wait for crowds to come back, then Wilder still has a case to make the fight. If it was just down to Wilder, then there is no case because, as we've said, he's had his opportunity. Now, of course, in the first case, Deontay Wilder says he's injured and the fight is put off. There's nothing they can do. They can't make him alright overnight. He's injured, he cannot fight. So in that case, then there is no way. It is down to Wilder. But, of course, an injury is not because he deliberately done it. But then the second case would need to be agreed. The second case would need to be agreed between both parties. It's just whether Deontay Wilder was the one who said, we cannot fight, I'm not fighting without crowds, and that's that. So let's move the date to December. In that situation, that does make Deontay Wilder's case weaker, but if there was a mutual agreement where Bob Arum and Tyson Fury said, no, we don't really want to fight without crowds, so let's search for a resolution in December, that makes it a little bit more difficult because there is a wrinkle there that Deontay Wilder and his team can say, well, they agreed. It wasn't me that put the fight off in October, it was both of us. And then of course that means that Deontay Wilder wasn't the one who put the fight off twice. He put it off once due to an injury, and the second time it was a mutual agreement. So I guess that is some way in which Deontay Wilder can build a case. And December, that was when the fight was supposed to happen. It didn't. There were many dates being thrown around, but there was not one that was pinned down. Tyson Fury tried to move on, but still didn't fight on December 5th. There wasn't money there, but that wasn't the only thing, I don't believe. I think that the mediation as well as the finances not being there for the fight necessarily for a pay-per-view event, I think that both of it played a part in Tyson Fury not fighting on December 5th. So guys, anyway, what are your thoughts on this? Do you believe it will be Tyson Fury versus Deontay Wilder 3 next, or Tyson Fury is free to go and face Anthony Joshua? Obviously, there are many perspectives from which you can take this from. You can take it from Wilder's perspective or Tyson Fury's. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Also leave a like and subscribe if you are new. Thanks guys.